in the last day in this COP. Thank you so much for your participation.
Voilà. Thank you so much again for these inspiring opening remarks that really help us set the course for the next 2 hours. A big thank you to everyone who has made it on, again, a very busy Saturday. And for those who are following on stream, a big thank you to the organizer, IUCN, FAO, the land use group of the Marrakesh Partnership. So why are we here and why we should all be very, very excited? As we've heard in the opening remarks, we are really at a pivot moment on the climate change trajectory and specifically on the land use sector. We are moving from an era where we have been negotiating, announcing goodwill, making pilots, into a decade where we have to massively see scaling up finance, investment, and action. So this meeting is very important, and to me there's a there's not the title of the event, but the verb in the title is key, is demonstrate. We would like to bring the evidence that the transformation of the land use sector is not only needed, but is also possible, and that it can be done at the scale and at the speed that is required to deliver not only on climate change, but on biodiversity, on social justice, and on development. So for the next 2 hours, we're going to have a remarkable set of speakers. Each one of them is an agent of change with a very special vantage point. We have a puzzle at any COP. When you go out, it's a puzzle of 60 billion, or almost 60 billion pieces. Each piece is a ton of CO2. And land use holds 1/3 of those pieces. So from today's meeting, we will really get a sense of what is the game plan to put together all of our pieces. What is the evidence that we can deliver it? And we're going to do this with a series of spotlights intervention by individuals that will share their perspective and help us frame a particular issue on transformation, on finance. We will have 3 TED Talks. Again, they're going to inspire us and help us inspire others. And we're going to have 2 panel discussions where we will go deeper with colleagues who have not only been on the game for a long time, but really leading the game. So I hope you will be as excited as I am, and at the end of this you will be as inspired and empowered to really go out there and assure everyone that land use sector solutions are possible and are coming at scale. With that, I would like now to invite the first keynote speaker. Actually, he will set out the stage for us. It's Michael Wallacing. He's the Managing Director for NCS Roadmap at Conservation International. Michael, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. You mentioned scaling and speed. If we could move on to the next slide. I'm Michael Wallacing, and I'm here to share a new exponential roadmap for natural climate solutions by Conservation International and our partners listed here. This roadmap is about how to scale natural climate solutions, and it's setting the stage by bringing the science of what we know is possible together with the science of what we know has to be done for 1.5 degrees. So let's start with the IPCC 6th assessment report. It highlighted 2 critical facts. First, the window for a safe climate landing is still open, but it's closing fast. And second, we can only climb through that window together if we transform our relationship with nature. We cannot keep 1.5 degrees within reach through an energy and industry transition alone. Next slide, please. Our report introduces a new carbon law for nature to steer the nature transition. It is a new conception of Johan Rockström's 2017 carbon law in partnership with Johan. His carbon law has been a powerful meme to shift the thinking of policy, business, and finance to think more forward in time, to bring the targets closer. We can't just think about what we have to do in 2050. We need to cut the problem into steps. This notion of time steps, of an exponential reduction in emissions, has been a critical driver of accelerating climate ambition, but also climate action. And we need to do the same thing here with nature. While cutting emissions in half every decade is enough from energy, it is not enough from land. Land can and must do more. The carbon law for nature tells us that to keep 1.5 degrees within reach, we must transition all agriculture and land use from its current 12.5 gigatons of source emissions to net zero by 2030, and then on to a 5 gigaton sink by 2040 and 10 gigatons by 2050. This seems like a nearly impossible challenge, but nature is different than fossil emissions. At the same time, nature is both a source of emissions in some places and a sink of emissions in other places. We must stop the destruction of healthy ecosystems where it's happening, while at the same time recovering healthy ecosystems around the world where we can. And we're mapping out how to deliver this pathway, all with existing solutions and at reasonable cost. Next slide, please. While the carbon law for nature sets the destination, a useful and inclusive roadmap must focus on people. And that's what we do here. We were focusing on who has to follow this roadmap, where they have to go, how each individual can contribute. And that's the second innovation of our roadmap, refocusing the science of natural climate solutions on social science and people. Who has to do what, where, and how are they going to act? How can we enable those changes through the enabling actors, through finance, through policy? And how can we achieve that just transition? How are they linked by protection and management and restoration of nature and the resilience of our working lands? Next slide, please. We've mapped out 8 people-centered action tracks to achieve this transition. This is a new view of natural climate solutions that emerges when we focus on people. I've arranged these action tracks here in this slide, or what we call action tracks or groups of solutions, and we focused on specific actors on the ground. These are in 3 categories: protection in green of natural ecosystems, management of working lands in pink, and restoration of natural ecosystems in purple. Each of these circles showing the 2030 mitigation that's needed and possible. We use a land use perspective for restoration to separate it out from management. Restoration in this circle only includes shifts from working lands back into natural ecosystems. Many people rightly consider restoration of working lands also to be a restorative action. In our model, that's included in management, just for a point of information. The tracks in the middle, these middle circles, the big ones here, IPLC rights and resources, climate smart forestry, climate smart grazing, farming, these are focused on single actor groups. And they're designed to help get into the weeds of what we need to do to enable those actors to deliver this scale of change. Next slide, please. Speaking of acceleration, the third innovation in our report is to actually put the NCS mitigation that we need on a timeline. This is that exponential growth, that Rockströmian vision for acceleration, right? So the carbon law for nature is a top-down view. It tells us what the models, the integrated assessment models, tell us land has to do. These curves tell us what land can do from a cost-effective perspective based on a literature from land accountants like my colleague Bronson Griscom. They have synthesized this literature of NCS mitigation opportunity. They include costs, they include a prioritization of land carbon, and restoration from protection, restoration, and management at scale. They reflect the well-known hierarchy of mitigation. So just as you reduce, reuse, and recycle, we have to protect, then manage, then restore. And what we see here is when we put protection on a timeline, we see that we have to cut ecosystem destruction in half every 5 years for the next decade to achieve the level of change needed. We need to double mitigation on our working lands every year between now and 2026 to reach 8 gigatons of mitigation from working